Hello friends, in this short video, we will see how soldering is done and what we should pay attention to. Enjoy watching. Soldering is a fundamental skill in electronics, metalwork, and various DIY projects. It involves joining two or more metal components using a filler metal, known as solder, which has a lower melting point than the metals being joined. Here are some basic soldering techniques to help you get started. 1. Safety first. Always work in a well-ventilated area to avoid inhaling solder fumes. Wear safety glasses to protect your eyes from hot solder and splatters. Use heat-resistant surfaces or a soldering mat to protect your work area. 2. Gather your materials. Soldering iron. Choose one with adjustable temperature settings for better control. Solder wire. Use rosin core solder for electronics. Lead-free solder is preferred for safety. Soldering stand, to hold the soldering iron when not in use. Wet sponge or brass sponge, to clean the soldering iron tip. Flux, helps improve solder flow and adhesion. Some solder wire already has flux. Third hand or helping hands tool, to hold components in place. 3. Prepare your work area. Ensure a clean and clutter-free workspace. Arrange components and wires in the desired position. 4. Prepare the soldering iron. Plug in the soldering iron and set it to the appropriate temperature for your project, usually between 350 degrees Celsius to 400 degrees Celsius for electronics. Allow the soldering iron to heat up fully before use, usually a few minutes. 5. Clean the soldering iron tip. Use a wet sponge or brass sponge to clean the tip of the soldering iron. The tip should be shiny and free of any old solder or debris. 6. Apply flux, if needed. Apply a small amount of flux to the joint area. Flux helps remove oxidation and improves solder flow. 7. Heat the joint. Place the soldering iron tip on the joint area, applying gentle pressure to heat both the component lead and the PCB pad or wire. Heat the joint for a few seconds until it's hot enough to melt the solder. 8. Apply solder. Touch the solder wire to the joint, not the soldering iron tip. Allow the solder to flow and cover the joint evenly. It should form a smooth, shiny, and concave fillet. 9. Remove the solder and iron. Remove the solder wire first and then lift the soldering iron from the joint. Allow the joint to cool naturally without moving the components. 10. Inspect and clean. Inspect the joint for any cold solder joints, dull, grainy appearance, or solder bridges, unwanted connections. Use solder wick or a desoldering pump to remove excess solder or correct mistakes. Clean the soldering iron tip again before moving to the next joint. 11. Practice and patience. Soldering requires practice to develop steady hands and precision. Be patient and take your time to ensure quality solder joints. Remember that soldering can be challenging at first, but with practice, you'll improve your skills and create reliable connections for your projects. Always follow safety precautions and consult specific guidelines for your particular soldering task. I hope our video was useful. You can support me by following our channel. Goodbye.